Over the next year, I plan to create a visual novel titled After the Trolley Problem, based on the famous thought experiment where you are given a choice of whether or not to kill one person to save the lives of 5. There have been attempts to make games based on this thought experiment in the past. Neil.Fun and the Cyanide and Happiness team have both created very fun joke games playing around with this concept. My game will not be a joke. It will be deadly serious, fully exploring the actual consequences of such a decision. Rather than being generic theoreticals, all of the people involved in the problem will be actual characters with names and faces and personalities. Like, you can pull that lever and kill one person to save multiple others, but the game will not end at that point. That's just the beginning. Now, the player has to go to the dead man's funeral and deal with the guilt of killing him and question if they made the right choice. And I don't want there to be a clear right choice. I want it to be a hard decision no matter what you do. I plan for the different main characters to have traits that make the problem more and more complicated. How much is a life worth if the person you're killing is evil? What if they're suicidal? What if they're incredibly kind? And the answer is, I don't know. I think by making the problem complicated, hammering in the actual consequences, the thought experiment can be taken from the cold calculus where 90% of people choose to pull the lever without hesitation to an actual difficult choice. I plan to have 6 story routes, each centered on a different character, and have each of these routes end in their own morally gray choice, determining which ending you get. The in-game justification for why the player is put in this scenario is that they work at the station for a trolley company. One of the trolleys, carrying 3 people, has damaged brakes and is about to crash, presumably killing the people on board. You can divert the trolley to another track, except, oh no, your coworker Rusty is standing there and will die! Will you kill him to save the 3 people on the trolley? The traditional problem uses 5 people, but I've decided to cut that down to just 3, both for the practical reasons of 5 people on the path of the trolley, meaning more writing and more art assets, and because reducing the number of people involved makes the decision more difficult, in my opinion. Allow me to introduce the game's cast using stand-in artwork. Rusty Isaacs is the man you are asked to sacrifice. An elderly, kind-hearted man who is your co-worker at the trolley station. He doesn't have any family, but he has a dog he takes care of. He's the type of person who you could delude yourself into thinking no one would miss if he died. He's also so friendly that if you do kill him, it will fill the player with guilt. I think it might be fun to make his dog wait at the train station if he dies, a la Hachiko. You know, just to hammer in the guilt. I think the main diverging choice in his route would be whether or not you let him know that you effectively sacrificed 3 other people for him. And I feel like either way, he's going to blame himself. I've also considered having his route end with him dying anyway to hammer in the feelings of hopelessness and the irony that you let 3 people die for someone who is going to die anyway. This is not going to be a lighthearted game. Christopher Barnett is one of the people who will die if you don't pull the lever. He's this handsome, heroic paramedic, this guy who dedicates every second of every day to helping others. He barely sleeps, he works constant overtime, he volunteers in his spare time. He's a man who has saved so many other people, to the point where it is kind of unsettling. Like, I see Chris as being almost a shell of a human being, someone who has never thought of living for himself, and that leads to this question, is it good that he's doing this at the cost of his own life? Chris's route will be about trying to convince him to take a break, to rest for once in his life. And then the ending will have him stumble across some burning building. I like the idea of the different routes forming a sort of jigsaw puzzle and the explanation of why this fire is happening coming in a different route. Anyway, you'll be given the choice of letting Chris run into the burning building and die saving others, or live and hate himself for not doing more to help. Violet Sky is the second of the trio you save if you pull the lever. She is a perky goth girl who is suicidal, and her route has you bonding with her and debating the reasons why she feels like dying, which I have not exactly figured out yet. The important thing is she wants to die, and you can't talk her out of this. And the options at the end of her route are to let her die or to institutionalize her. In my head, I have this imagery of her jumping off a cliff and flying like a bird and feeling free for the first time in her life and being happy, and then it just cuts to black, and the narration describes her mangled corpse down on the rocks, and the player character feels worthless for not saving her. And in the other ending, I see her in a small padded room in a straitjacket. hair unkempt, staring at the player with empty eyes. I don't want there to be a happy ending to her route. I'm heavily inspired regarding this character by the Cosmonaut essay by Abigail Thorne, which is a masterpiece of a video essay, where Thorne debates the ethics of bodily autonomy when someone is suicidal. It's a video that left me unsure of how to feel, which is what I want this game to make the player feel. The final person on the trolley is Lorenzo Sachs, a wealthy corporate raider guy who recently bought the trolley service. He is the absolute worst. He's a greedy, self-centered finance guy who slashed funding for all of the trolley system's safety features and thus indirectly is responsible for everything that happens. Also, I think it would be fun if he survived the crash. Like, if you don't pull the lever, Chris and Violet die, but the asshole responsible for everything survives and his route actually occurs in the timeline where the trolley crashes. His story would be about him trying to convince you that everything was Rusty's fault and pin the blame for the crash on your coworker out of greed. And he can give some monologues about selfishness being a virtue and greed being good and social Darwinism being awesome. He is supposed to be the worst, someone who raises the question, is murder justifiable when the victim is someone so vile? It also raises the bigger questions about capitalism as an economic system and the endless moral philosophy issues that spring up from corporate greed. I would like to give Sachs one sympathetic trait. I want him to have a son who is dying of a terrible illness and needs an organ transplant. Sachs is abusing loopholes and using his wealth to get his son better medical care because he's a jerk, but also because he genuinely loves his son. Dr. Iris Morgan is a stoic surgeon you can befriend if you don't pull the lever. And just going to give away the reveal, she is a serial killer who murders people so their organs can be given to sick people. This is a reference to the transplant problem, a revision on the trolley problem that is, on paper, the same question, but feels more evil to most people. Dr. Morgan will try to take the player under her wings and train them as her assistant. It will turn out that Sachs' son is one of her patients and she wants to kill him to save his son. And if the player goes along with this, Sachs shows his only moment of kindness in the game, calmly accepting his death once he figures out what's going on, and begging the player to look out for his son. I want Dr. Morgan to be a very stoic character with a constant neutral expression and shiny white glasses that hide her eyes, but when she's killing, she tilts her head up to smile and you see her eyes for the first time, and she looks monstrous. Like, you can see in her eyes that she enjoys what she does, and that's horrifying. Anyway, in one of her endings, you become her assistant and keep killing people for the greater good. And in the other, you tell her she's a monster and she cuts you up for your organs. The final character is Sergeant Janet Palmer, a character who I've used before in a few other things I wrote. She debuted in His War, a short story about an Alfred XP being interrogated after a Batman XP is found dead that I wrote in college. I later reused her as a character in Smoke and Mirrors, a visual novel I wrote my final semester of college, which after the trolley problem is a spiritual successor to. Palmer's characterization wasn't as solid in His War, but in Smoke and Mirrors, she was a stern but dedicated detective who antagonizes the player at times, but had a very strong sense of right and wrong. And I want to reuse this character both as a callback and to have someone handle both the investigation into the trolley deaths and into Dr. Morgan's organ theft. In her route, which happens if you pull the lever, Palmer learns what happened and then arrests you for murdering Rusty. She firmly believes that you've done something horrible, that it's wrong to play God and decide who lives and who dies. And this is an unpopular opinion, and it's one I don't know if I agree with, but I want there to be a character who's firmly against pulling the lever and articulates why doing so is wrong. The last main character is Spectre, a mysterious entity that freezes time to talk to the player from time to time. I do not yet know what Spectre is, if they're a god or a hallucination or me or whatever, but they exist as someone that the player can bounce ideas off of and debate choices before making them. Think that the final secret ending, gotten for getting the other 12, has Spectre talk to the player and discuss the game and the complexities of morality. I want Spectre to be mean and sarcastic and claim every choice you made is the wrong one, and then in the Secret 13th ending, admit that they don't know what the right choice was and are as desperate as the player is to know the right answer. Spectre takes the form of a hooded figure with no discernible traits beyond that. I think it would be interesting for the colors of the background and UI to invert whenever they stop time to talk to the player. Now that I've introduced the game's characters, allow me to introduce myself. I am Casey Jarms. Some of you know me from my video essays. I studied game design in college, but was unable to find a job in the industry. My dream job has always been to be a narrative designer. I think there are a lot of interesting heartstring-pulling things you can do as a writer utilizing the medium of video games. As previously mentioned, during my senior year of college, I wrote a visual novel titled Smoke and Mirrors. After graduating, I spent 2 years working on an RPG Maker game called Day of Apotheosis in my spare time. I think that both of these projects turned out great, but I do not want this game to take 2 years like DOA did. I had that game 80% done after the first 6 months, but that's when I got busy with making video essays and development labs for months at a time. I want this visual novel to be completely done by May 2027. I will be posting status update videos at the start of each month describing how the development process is going. The biggest hurdle for this game will be the artwork. I am not an artist. Smoke and Mirrors feature character sprites made by a classmate of mine, with backgrounds I assembled out of free 3D assets. DOA featured sprites from asset packs I purchased. I intend to commission an artist to make sprite work for the game, and am debating how much to spend on that. I think most characters could benefit from having multiple poses, although realistically, they would probably only have 3 at most. I also want to have CGs for the game's endings, and for the sake of budget, only for the endings. I do not intend to use AI art because I think that would look cheap and tacky. I think that for backgrounds I will run royalty-free images through filters to give them a vaguely pencil drawing look. For example, here's a photo of a graveyard. Oh look, now it's a background. I think that having the backgrounds be in black and white and the characters be in black and white with just hints of their associated color would be very nice from an aesthetic standpoint and also work great as a visual metaphor. Like, hey, this world is black and white, except the people in it aren't. For the trolley crash scene, I think I'll create the station using 3D models, then run the filter on screen grabs of those arranged models. I intend to use Ren'Py for the engine. I haven't really used it before, but I understand that it's free, simple, and has everything I need for this project. My goal for the next month is to have the prologue, aside from art, written and implemented. I will talk to you then. Now, to end this video, I will show you what I have done at this point in time.